The envelope lay on the table among the other letters, white with the blue logo of the Midwest People's Bank. I didn't notice it right away, as I was busy sorting my bills. Only after I had drunk my second cup of coffee did I pick up the envelope and turn it over. Strange. I had never done business with the Midwest People's Bank. I opened the letter, skimmed the first lines, and felt a chill run down my spine. Dear Mrs. Schneider, we are writing to remind you of your overdue monthly mortgage payment. What followed was an amount that made me dizzy. $70.40. What the hell is this? I muttered as I read on. The letter stated that I was in arrears on my second monthly payment for a mortgage loan of $950,000 that had been taken out in March. If I did not pay the amount within 2 weeks, the bank would be forced to initiate foreclosure proceedings. My first thought was to call the bank and explain that it had to be a mistake. I had never taken out a loan of such an astronomical amount. My small house on Maple Street, which I had bought with my late husband Herbert 20 years ago, was long since paid off. Why would I, a 67-year-old widow, take out a new loan? I dialed the number for the Midwest People's Bank that was provided in the letter. After a long wait on hold, I finally heard the voice of a female employee. Good day, this is Wilma Schneider. I received a letter about an overdue loan payment, but there must be a mistake. I have not taken out a loan with your bank. One moment, Mrs. Schneider. I will check the information, the girl replied politely. While she checked the data, I looked out the kitchen window into my small but well-kept garden. Herbert had died 10 years ago, and since then I had been living alone in the house, gradually getting used to life as a widow. 43 years together and then nothing. No, not entirely empty. I had children, Hannah and Leo, but they had long been leading their own lives and didn't often think of their mother. Mrs. Schneider. The employee's voice brought me back to reality. According to our records, you did indeed take out a mortgage loan for $950,000 for a term of 30 years on March 14th of this year. The loan was for the purchase of a property at 27 Lakeview Terrace in Kings Point. But that's impossible, I exclaimed. I never signed any documents for a loan, especially not for that much money. We have all the necessary documents, Mrs. Schneider, including your signature on the loan agreement, copies of your state ID, your social security numbers, and your tax returns from the last 3 years. I felt my mouth go dry. Someone had used my information to apply for a loan of a colossal amount. This is fraud, I said firmly. Someone stole my data. In that case, you should go to the police, Mrs. Schneider, and you should come to our main branch with an ID to have a hearing. But I must warn you that the bank will hold you responsible for the loan payments until the situation is clarified. After the call, I sat down at my desk and felt my hands trembling. Who could have done such a thing? Who had access to my documents? Suddenly, the phone rang. My daughter's name appeared on the screen. Mama, did you remember that today is Zoe's birthday? Hannah began without a greeting. We're expecting you at 3 p.m., and please don't wear that awful green sweater. It's a restaurant, not a vegetable garden. Zoe, my granddaughter, was turning 12. Of course I had remembered and had already prepared a gift, a silver bracelet with a star charm. I haven't forgotten, Hannah, I said, but I have a serious problem. I got a letter from the bank. Mama, don't start with that again. She interrupted me with poorly concealed irritation. If you get another credit card offer, just throw it away. How many times do I have to tell you not to open all those letters? Hannah, this isn't about an offer. Someone has taken out a loan for almost $1 million in my name. There was a pause on the phone. What is this nonsense, Mama? Hannah finally said with a nervous laugh. Who would give a retiree a loan like that? You're confusing something. I'm not confusing anything, I contradicted. I have a letter from the bank. It says in black and white about a loan in my name and allegedly issued with my signature. Mama, your blood pressure must be sky high again. Hannah's voice had a sweet, caring quality that always meant maximum irritation. Are you sure you took your pills today? Stop talking to me as if I'm an old woman who's lost her mind. I rarely raised my voice, but now I couldn't help it. I am of sound mind, and I know exactly what's going on here. Someone stole my information and took out a loan, and I'm going to report it to the police. The police? Oh my God, Mama, are you trying to embarrass us in front of the whole town? Hannah sounded panicked. Listen, I'll come by after work. I'll look at this letter and we'll figure it out. But for God's sake, don't call anyone. Okay, I agreed, a little confused by this reaction. Come by after work. After I hung up, I thought. My daughter's reaction seemed strange to me. Was she too anxious about the threat of going to the police? Hannah was usually the first to tell me not to make a fuss about nothing. To distract myself from my anxious thoughts, I decided to get ready for my granddaughter's party. I took a dark blue dress from my closet, one that I only wore on special occasions, and began to iron it. My thoughts kept returning to the mysterious loan. At 3 p.m., I was sitting in the restaurant, the Gilded Lily, a pretentious establishment with inflated prices and tiny portions. Leo, my son, was already there with his wife Daniela and their teenage children, 15-year-old Noah and 14-year-old Marie. Leo worked as a customs broker and always emphasized his status with expensive watches and suits. "Mom, you didn't even bother to comb your hair properly again," he said instead of greeting me as I approached the table. "Your hair is sticking out over your left ear." "Hello, Leo?" I ignored his remark. "Hello, Daniela." "Hello, dears." The teenagers mumbled something in response, still glued to their phones. Daniela nodded with a polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Where's Hannah?" I asked, sitting down in the offered chair. "Late at work," Leo answered. "Some problems with the Wagner family. You know how responsibly she takes her duties as an investigator." Hannah worked in Child Protective Services, dealing with broken families. She always said her job was to rescue children from incompetent parental homes. Sometimes I thought that sentence was also a reproach aimed at me. We sat at the table for half an hour when Hannah finally showed up with her husband Frank and the birthday girl, Zoe. My granddaughter, a tall girl with brown hair for her age, was wearing an expensive dress that made her look like a miniature copy of her mother. "Grandma, you came," Zoe exclaimed with faint surprise, as if my presence at her birthday party was something unusual. "Of course I came, dear. I would never miss your birthday." I handed her a neatly wrapped box with the bracelet. "Happy birthday." Zoe took the gift without much enthusiasm and set it aside without even unwrapping it. "Thanks," she muttered, then turned to her cousin Marie to show her something on her phone. "Mom, what's this story you made up about the loan?" Hannah whispered to me while the others were busy studying the menu. "I didn't make anything up," I answered just as quietly. "I got a letter from the bank. For God's sake, don't talk about it in front of everyone." Hannah straightened up and said loudly, "Mom, would you like salad or soup?" Lunch proceeded in a tense atmosphere. Leo and Hannah discussed general business matters, occasionally turning to me with condescending questions. "Do you even remember Uncle Robert?" Or, "Mom, are you sure you're okay all alone in that big house?" My house was far from big, just 3 bedrooms, a living room, and a kitchen. But the children always hinted that I should move into a smaller apartment. I suspected they just wanted to sell the house and split the money. After lunch, as Zoe opened her presents, I noticed Hannah and Leo exchanging meaningful glances as my granddaughter carelessly tossed the silver bracelet aside. "Must be old-fashioned," Hannah muttered, loud enough for me to hear. I wanted to say that it was a replica of my grandmother's bracelet, which she had worn her entire life, but I kept silent. What was the use of explaining the value of things to people who only cared about the price? When the party was over, Hannah said she would stop by my place in an hour. I took the bus home, feeling strangely anxious. Something about my daughter's behavior was unsettling me. At home, I read the letter from the bank again. The address of the property purchased with the loan seemed familiar. Lakeview Terrace was a new upscale neighborhood by the lake, frequently featured in the local paper. Had someone stolen my information to buy a house there? While I waited for Hannah, I turned on the computer, a gift from Leo for Christmas. "So you can stay up to date, Mom." I wasn't very good with computers, but I knew the basics. I opened a search engine and typed in the address. 7 Lakeview Terrace, Kings Point. Photos of a luxurious 2-story house with panoramic windows and a lake view appeared on the screen. The value of such a property could indeed be around $1 million. I scrolled down the page and froze when I saw the information about a recent sale. The house had been sold in March of this year, and the date of the transaction matched the date the loan was processed. I heard the sound of an approaching car and looked out the window. Hannah had parked her brand new SUV in front of the house. I noticed that the car was new too. Previously, she had owned a mid-sized sedan. When my daughter entered the house, I immediately noticed her nervousness. She avoided looking me in the eye and straightened her hair too often. a gesture that always betrayed her agitation. "Where's that letter, Mom?" she asked without taking off her coat. I silently handed her the envelope. Hannah skimmed the text quickly, and I saw her turn pale. "This is some kind of mistake," she said uncertainly. "Or fraud. Someone used your data." "That's exactly what I told you on the phone this morning," I said, "and I was going to report it to the police." No, Hannah said hastily. "I'll take care of it myself. I have a friend at Midwest People's Bank who can help me clear this up." "I found out something too," I said calmly. "The address in the letter is a new house on Lakeview Terrace. It's a very beautiful house, judging by the pictures on the internet. 2 stories with a view of the lake." Hannah looked up sharply. "You looked it up on the internet?" "Yes," I nodded. "And I also noticed that you have a new car. I don't remember you saying you wanted to change it." "Mom, what are you trying to say?" Hannah's voice became hard. "Nothing yet," I shrugged. "Just an observation." Hannah nervously clutched her handbag. "Listen, I told you I'll take care of this stupid letter. You don't need to worry." "I think I do," I retorted. "Someone took out a loan in my name, used my documents, forged my signature, and if I don't pay this loan, I will lose my house." "Nobody is taking your house away," Hannah exclaimed with sudden anger. "Damn it, Mom. Why do you always have to make everything so complicated? I told you I'll solve the problem." She was almost shouting, and I could see the red blotches on her neck, a sure sign of extreme agitation. There was only one thing that could cause such a reaction. Hannah knew much more about the loan than she was saying. "It was you," I said quietly, looking her directly in the eye. "You took out the loan in my name." My daughter looked away. "Don't be ridiculous, Mom. Why would I do that?" "I don't know," I answered. "But I'm going to find out." Hannah snatched the letter from my hands. "I'm taking this with me. And please don't do anything stupid. Don't call the bank. Don't go to the police. I'll handle it." She ran out of the house, slamming the door loudly behind her. I stood in the middle of the living room, feeling strangely devastated. My own daughter had stolen my information to buy a $1 million house. A house she hadn't even told me about. I walked slowly to my computer and opened the page with the pictures of the house on Lakeview Terrace again. A luxurious building with huge windows and a terrace overlooking the lake. A place I had never been invited to. In my inbox, I noticed an unread message from the bank. When I opened it, I saw an electronic copy of the loan agreement that had been sent to my address when the deal was closed. In the column for the borrower's signature, there was a forgery of my signature, so crudely done that it was strange how the bank hadn't noticed. I leaned back in my chair and felt a cold anger building up inside me. For years, my children had treated me like a burden, tolerating my presence at family gatherings with barely concealed irritation, talking to me as if I were senile. And now Hannah had crossed the final line. She hadn't just stolen my data. She had put the only thing I had left at risk: my home, my independence, my dignity. I pulled my notebook from the desk drawer and flipped through it, searching for the right number. I needed a lawyer, but not the kind Leah would recommend. I needed someone who would stand on my side, against my own children. The law office of Marlene Richter, Esquire, was located in an old brick building in the business district of Kings Point. I found her contact information in the city directory, where she modestly advertised herself as a specialist in elder law and financial abuse. Exactly what I needed. I called first thing in the morning, and to my surprise, the secretary scheduled an appointment for me for the same day at 2:30 p.m. Apparently, the lawyer's calendar wasn't too full. When I got off the bus, I stood in front of the entrance for a while, gathering my composure. The word lawyer had always sounded intimidating to me. I had only had to see a lawyer twice in my life, when Herbert and I bought the house, and when we drew up his will. In both cases, they were acquaintances of Herbert's, and he handled all the negotiations himself. I can do this, I told myself and pushed the heavy door open. The reception area was small but cozy. Behind the desk sat a young woman with a short haircut and thick glasses. "Mrs. Schneider?" she asked when she saw me. "Ms. Richter is expecting you. Please come in." The lawyer's office looked unexpected. Instead of a stiff, formal interior, I saw a bright room with large windows and potted plants. Behind a wide desk sat a woman in her 60s with short-cropped gray hair and a bright blue suit. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Schneider." She stood up and offered me her hand. Marlene Richter, please, have a seat. Her handshake was firm, like that of a person used to showing confidence. I sat down in the chair she offered me. Tell me what brings you to me, Marlene said, pulling out a notepad. I took a deep breath and started with the letter from the bank. I told her about the call to the bank, Hannah's reaction, how I had found the pictures of the house on the internet, and the last conversation I had with my daughter. My voice trembled, but I tried to stick to the facts without getting emotional. Marlene listened attentively, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When I was finished, she leaned back in her chair and thoughtfully tapped her pen on the table. What you've described, Mrs. Schneider, is a classic case of identity theft, complicated by the fact that the perpetrator is a family member. Unfortunately, this is not uncommon, especially with older individuals. Do you think my daughter really did it? I asked, still hoping for another explanation. What do you think? Marlene looked at me intently. I sighed. I think so. The new car, the nervousness when talking about the loan, the attempt to silence me. But I can hardly believe Hannah could do something like this. She was always ambitious and a bit arrogant. But commit a crime. People change, Marlene said, and not always for the better. Tell me, has your daughter shown signs of, let's say, disrespect for your personal and financial independence? I thought about it. There had been many instances over the years where my children had tried to control my decisions, especially those involving money. After Herbert, my husband, died, Leo insisted that I give him power of attorney to manage my accounts, I said. He claimed it would be safer, but I refused. That caused quite a scandal. He even threatened to have me declared incompetent if I continued to be stubborn. And the real estate? Was there constant talk of selling your house? I nodded, especially in the last 2 years. Hannah says it's too big for me alone, that I can't maintain it. And Leo calculates how much I can get for the sale. They even found me a nice little apartment in a retirement home. Marlene made a note in her notebook. Do you have a will? Who gets your inheritance? Hannah and Leo in equal shares, I said. Herbert and I decided that years ago. Although I admit that lately I've been thinking about changing it, leaving the money to the grandchildren instead of the children. I see. Marlene nodded. Now let's get back to our case. We have a few options. The first is to go to the police and report fraud. That is the most drastic step, and it could lead to criminal prosecution of your daughter. I flinched at those words. Hannah a criminal, my daughter in jail. It seemed absurd. Are there other options? I asked quietly. The second option is a civil lawsuit, Marlene continued. We could sue your daughter and have the loan agreement declared null and void as fraudulent. This is less drastic than criminal proceedings, but would still lead to a public scandal. And the third option? I clutched my handbag nervously. Try to settle the matter amicably, Marlene shrugged. I could write a letter on your behalf, laying out the facts and demanding that your daughter take over the loan or pay it back immediately. The threat of criminal prosecution might force her to act. I fell silent, trying to digest the information. All the options seemed terrible, but even more terrible was the thought that my own daughter had put me in this position. What would happen if I just did nothing? I finally asked. If I just ignore this loan? Marlene shook her head. Then the bank will initiate foreclosure proceedings. First, they will charge late fees. Then they will hand it over to collection agencies. Eventually, they could sue you and get the right to foreclose, including seizing your property, meaning your house. But that's not fair, I exclaimed. I didn't sign anything. Justice and the law are not always the same thing, Mrs. Schneider, Marlene said gently. To prove that you didn't take out the loan, we would have to prove fraud, and that means naming the fraudster. I closed my eyes, feeling a lump in my throat. As long as I could remember, Hannah had always been a difficult child. Stubborn, sharp-witted, ambitious, calculating beyond her years. She rarely made friends in school but always got the best grades. She often clashed with her brother, but she knew how to manipulate him. Herbert thought she would make a great lawyer or politician. Our girl has an iron character, he used to say proudly. But there was something else about Hannah. Beneath the mask of self-confidence lurked a painful need for recognition, for validation of her worth. I noticed it in the smallest things, how she bragged about new things, how desperate she was to impress others, how painfully she reacted to any criticism. I remember when she was 15, She came home crying because she hadn't gotten the lead role in the school play. "That role was mine." She screamed and locked herself in her room. And the next day, we learned that the girl who had gotten the role had had an accident. Someone had pushed her on the stairs, and she had broken her arm. Hannah got the role. Herbert and I never discussed the incident, but I could see the worry in his eyes. When she grew up, Hannah didn't change. She married Frank not out of love, but because he came from a well-connected, respected family. She chose to work in social services not out of compassion for troubled families, but because it gave her power over others. And I knew she was always envious of those who lived in upscale neighborhoods, drove expensive cars, vacationed in exotic countries. "Mrs. Schneider." Marlene's voice brought me back to reality. "Do you need some time to think?" "Yes, I suppose I do," I nodded. "This is too big a decision to make immediately." "I understand." Marlene handed me a business card. "Call me when you've decided how you want to proceed. But don't take too long. Time is working against us." I stood up to leave, but paused at the door. "Ms. Richter, what would you do if you were me?" Marlene hesitated. "I can't give that kind of advice, Mrs. Schneider. Every person must decide for themselves what is more important to them, family ties or justice." "And what if there is no choice?" I asked quietly. "What if family ties are already broken?" "Then all that's left is justice," Marlene answered simply. "And self-respect." I left the office with a heavy heart. It was drizzling outside, and I opened the umbrella I always carried with me, an old habit my children made fun of. "Grandma, the weather woman," Zoe called me. "Mom, there are weather apps now," Hannah. Walking slowly to the bus stop, I thought about Marlene's words. Family ties versus justice. But aren't true family ties based on mutual respect? Can there be a real family where some members deceive and exploit others? The bus was late, and I sat down on a bench. People hurried past, seeking shelter from the rain, indifferent to other people's problems. And my thoughts circled around memories. There was Hannah, a little girl with pigtails, running up to me with a drawing. "Mommy, look, this is you." In the drawing, the angular figure of a woman with a huge smile. Here she is, a teenager rolling her eyes as I try to hug her before school. "Mom, you're embarrassing me." Here she is, a college graduate, proudly showing off her diploma. And I see in her eyes, look, I did it all by myself. Even though that's not true. Herbert and I worked double shifts to pay for her education, and then everything changed. After Zoe's birth, Hannah became even more distant. Her rare visits became a formality. Her conversations became a list of my shortcomings. "Mom, you should take care of your appearance." "Mom, your house looks old-fashioned." "Mom, you talk too much about the past." When Herbert died, Hannah organized the funeral without asking my opinion on anything. Chose a casket, flowers, even a dress for me to wear. "You're not in a state to make decisions right now, Mom," she said in a tone that allowed no contradiction. And after the funeral, she and Leo began dividing Herbert's belongings as if I didn't exist. His stamp collection, which he had collected his whole life. Leo had taken it without even asking me. "It will just collect dust at your place, Mom." I became a burden to them. A problem that needed to be solved. An old woman from whom one could only expect trouble. They stopped seeing me as a person. They probably never did. The bus pulled up, and I climbed the steps, struggling to hold onto my wet umbrella. A young woman offered me a seat, and I nodded gratefully. A small gesture of courtesy from a stranger. More than I had received from my own children in recent years. At home, the first thing I did was pull out my phone and dial the number of the only person I could trust. Andrea Schmidt, a friend from my time at the post office. Andrea was 5 years older than me, but she had more energy than people half her age. When she was widowed around the same time as me, she didn't get depressed. She started volunteering at an animal shelter and even began learning Spanish to better herself. "Wilma?" she answered after the third ring. "Is something wrong? You don't usually call in the middle of the day." I briefly told her about the loan situation and the visit to the lawyer. "What a snake!" Andrea exclaimed when I finished. "After everything you and Herbert did for her. Wilma, you should sue her. No, the police. Let her feel the full force of the law." "I don't know, Andrea," I sighed. "She's my daughter. How can I send her to jail? How can she steal from her own mother?" Andrea retorted. "Wilma, listen to me. I know you love your children. All mothers love their children, even the most ungrateful ones. But sometimes, love means letting them face the consequences of their actions. If Hannah gets away with this fraud, what will she do next time? Her words made sense, but I still had trouble accepting the idea of reporting my own daughter. I'll think about it, I said. I need some time. Just not too much, Andrea warned. Those bankers won't wait forever. And remember, I'm on your side, no matter what you decide. After talking to Andrea, I felt a little better. At least there was one person in the world who supported me unconditionally. I made tea and sat by the window, watching the rain turn into a torrential downpour. The drops drummed on the glass, creating a soothing rhythm. My thoughts slowly began to clear. What would Herbert say if he were in this situation? My husband was a kind man, but with firm principles. Justice must be served, he often said. And also, you can't let others walk all over you, even if those others are your own family. Maybe I had let my children disrespect me for too long. Maybe it was my gentleness and my accommodating nature that led Hannah to take this step. She knew I would rather stay silent than make a scene. But not this time. No more being the doormat people wipe their feet on. No more being the invisible one whose opinion can be ignored. No more being the out-of-touch old mother who is tolerated out of politeness. I picked up the phone and dialed Marlene Richter's number. "Mrs. Schneider?" she answered, surprised. "I didn't expect to hear from you so soon." "I've decided," I said firmly. "I want to file a lawsuit against my daughter and file a fraud report with the police." "Are you sure?" I heard the doubt in Marlene's voice. "That's a big step." "I'm absolutely sure," I replied. "If I back down now, I will never respect myself again, and my children will never respect me again." "All right," Marlene said after a pause. "Come back tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. We will prepare the necessary documents." When I hung up, I felt strangely relieved. For the first time in years, I had made a decision that concerned myself. Not what the children would say. It was scary and liberating at the same time. The phone rang again. Leo's name appeared on the screen. "Mom, have you gone crazy?" He began without a greeting. "Hannah just called me, hysterical. She said you're threatening to sue her over some letter from the bank." "It was nothing, Leo," I said calmly. "Your sister took out a loan in my name without my knowledge. That's called fraud." "Oh, come on, Mom," my son scoffed. "What's with the drama? So she took out a loan. She's paying it off. What do you care? The difference is that it's illegal," I said. "And if she stops paying, I'm the one who gets in trouble. She won't stop paying." Leo raised his voice. "Damn it, Mom, have you always been such a pain? Always making everything so complicated? Did you know?" I asked him directly. "Did you know Hannah used my papers?" Leo hesitated for a second. "I wasn't involved in the details. She said you two had an agreement." "We had no agreement," I interrupted him. "She stole my data, and if you knew about it and didn't stop her, then you're an accomplice." "An accomplice?" Leo laughed, but nervously. "Mom, you've been watching too many crime shows. Nobody considers this a crime. It's just a family matter." "No, Leo, it is a crime," I said firmly, "and I intend to get justice. For God's sake, Mom." There was impatience in my son's voice. "What justice? You want to put your own daughter in jail? Embarrass the whole family? What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking that my children consider me so insignificant that they don't even see a problem with using my name for their schemes," I retorted. "I'm thinking that you've both been treating me like a burden for years. I'm thinking it's time for that to stop. Mom, listen." Leo's voice turned sweetly persuasive. "Let me come over and we can talk about this. This is just a misunderstanding. Hannah didn't mean any harm. She just wanted a better life for her family. At my expense. Don't be so dramatic, Leo. Nobody is going to leave you with debt. Hannah is paying her loan, and she will keep paying it. What if she loses her job, gets sick, decides she doesn't want to pay anymore? What then?" "That won't happen," Leo said confidently. "Mom, you have to trust your children." "No, Leo," I replied quietly. "You should have respected your mother. But you didn't. And now it's time to pay for it." I hung up without waiting for an answer. My hands were shaking, but I felt surprisingly calm. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a helpless old woman, but like a person who could stand up for herself. Of course, Leo and Hannah would pressure me, use every means to make me back down. They would threaten, flatter, manipulate. They might even try to portray me as a senile old woman who had lost her mind, out of control. But now I had Marlene Richter, a lawyer who believed me and was ready to fight for my rights. I had Andrea, a friend who supported me unconditionally. And I had my resolve not to let anyone, not even my own children, trample on my dignity. The rain outside the window intensified, but I felt that my life was finally becoming clearer. I picked up the phone and dialed Marlene's number again. Ms. Richter, I was wondering, if we win the case, what happens to the house that Hannah bought with the loan money? The bank will likely seize it to pay off the loan, Marlene replied. And if your daughter is found guilty of fraud, she could face a fine and possibly probation. I see, I said. Thank you, I'll see you tomorrow. I hung up and thought, Hannah would lose her dream house, probably get a criminal record, probably resent me for the rest of her life. Leo would likely side with his sister. I could lose not only my children but also my grandchildren. A high price for justice. But the price of silence was even higher. The loss of self-respect. The feeling of having betrayed myself by letting my children deceive me with impunity. No, I couldn't back down. This was my last chance to show my children that I was not a useless person, not a senile old woman, but a human being with rights and dignity. And if I had to go into conflict with my own family for that, then so be it. I stared at the rain outside the window and thought that tomorrow a new chapter of my life would begin. A chapter in which I would be the protagonist, not a supporting character in my children's lives. The next morning was overcast, but it had stopped raining. I woke up early, before 7 a.m., and lay in bed for a long time, staring at the ceiling. My thoughts revolved around my upcoming meeting with Marlene and what was next for me. Doubts began to gnaw at my soul again. Was I doing the right thing? Was suing my own daughter too drastic a step? The phone on the nightstand rang. I looked at the screen. Hannah. My finger hovered over the answer button, but I decided not to pick up. Whatever she said now, it wouldn't change my mind. It would only drain the energy I no longer had. At 10 a.m., I was already in front of Marlene's office. The receptionist nodded understandingly when she saw me and let me into the office unannounced. Marlene was sitting at her desk, looking at some papers. "Good morning, Mrs. Schneider." She pointed to a chair. "I see you're early. That's good. We have more time." I sat down, clutching my handbag nervously. "Ms. Richter, I was wondering, do we really have to file a police report? Wouldn't a civil lawsuit be enough?" Marlene looked at me intently. "Are you having doubts?" "Yes," I admitted honestly. "I thought about it all night. I think a criminal case is too final. There's no going back after that." "Do you want there to be a way back?" Marlene asked gently. "After what your daughter did?" I sighed. "I don't know. What she did was terrible, but she's still my child." "Look." Marlene set the papers aside and leaned across the table toward me. "Let's do this. We'll gather all the evidence first, and then we'll decide which path to take. We could start with a civil suit and leave the question of criminal prosecution open. How about that?" "Yes, that would be better," I agreed, relieved. "Then let's start." Marlene pulled out a blank notepad. "We need to create a timeline of events and collect documents that confirm the fraud. Let's start at the beginning." "When did you first find out about the loan?" We spent the next 2 hours reconstructing what had happened. I told her about everything. The letter from the bank, the conversation with the employee, the strange reaction of Hannah and Leo, my daughter's new car, and the house on Lakeview Terrace. "So," Marlene summarized, "the loan was processed on March 14th. Were you anywhere on that day? Maybe traveling or at a doctor's appointment. We need to prove that you couldn't have physically signed the documents at the bank." I thought, trying to remember that day, March 14th. "Yes, I remember." I had a routine checkup at St. Elizabeth's Hospital that day. It took almost the whole day, from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. First tests, then a cardiologist consultation, then some other procedures. It was a Tuesday. I remember exactly because I was worried about the results. Great, Marlene made a note. We will request the medical records from the clinic to confirm your presence there. When the loan agreement was supposedly signed, that is a crucial piece of evidence. Will they give us that information? Upon the lawyer's request in preparation for the trial. Yes. Anything else? Oh, yes. We need samples of your real signature to compare it with the one on the loan agreement. Do you have your signature papers with you? I pulled my state ID and my driver's license from my handbag. Only these. The rest is at home. That's enough for a start. Marlene nodded. I'll make copies later. We will need an official handwriting analysis, but that's for the trial. She left the office with my documents, and I sat there, looking at the many plants on the windowsill. Most of them were succulents, small, unassuming, but surprisingly resilient. In a way, they reminded me of myself. Marlene returned with my papers and a glass of water for me. Here, drink this. We have a lot of work ahead of us. I took the water gratefully. What's next? Next, we need to get a copy of the loan agreement from the bank. I have already prepared the request. Marlene showed me a document on official letterhead. You need to sign it. We also need information about all loan payments, who made them and when. That will help prove that you had nothing to do with the loan. I signed the request, feeling strangely relieved that I wasn't the only one dealing with this complicated story. Now, about the house on Lakeview Terrace, Marlene continued. You said you found information about it on the internet, but we need the official property records. Who is it registered to? Who is the buyer on the sales contract? I will submit a request, but that will take some time. How long? I asked. 5 to 10 business days. Bureaucracy. Marlene shrugged. But there is a way to speed things up. I know a realtor who has access to the real estate database. He can informally give us preliminary information. I'll contact him today. What about the bank? I asked. How could they issue such a large loan without checking everything thoroughly? That's a good question. Marlene nodded. Banks are required to conduct strict checks on the borrower's identity. But if the fraudster had all your documents, including your social security number and your tax returns, plus a well-forged signature, plus if the application was submitted by someone you know well, who could answer personal questions about you. Banks make mistakes too. Or turn a blind eye if it's a good deal, I said. That's also possible, Marlene agreed. In any case, we will definitely find out if there were irregularities with the loan. The next few days passed in anxious anticipation. Marlene was busy gathering evidence, and I tried to live a normal life. Although it wasn't easy. The children didn't call, neither Hannah nor Leo. Apparently, they had decided to give me time to come to my senses. On the 4th day, Marlene called and asked me to come to her office. I have news, she said when I entered her office. A realtor I know has provided information about the house on Lakeview Terrace. Guess who it's registered to? Hannah? Not quite. Marlene handed me a printout. It's registered to Coldwell Holdings LLC. That's a limited liability company that your son-in-law, Frank Coldwell, founded 2 months ago, shortly before the purchase of the house. I frowned. Why all the effort? Why not register the house directly in their own names? To hide the true owner, Marlene explained. It's a common practice when people want to hide something. In this case, I think your daughter and her husband wanted to hide the connection between the loan in your name and the purchase of the house. If the house had been registered directly, to Hannah, it would have been too obvious where the money went. But they live in the house, don't they? How do they explain that? Officially, they are renting the house from Coldwell Holdings. At least that's what my source said. The rent is $1,000 a month, which is far below the market price for such a house. I shook my head. amazed at my daughter's cunning. I hadn't realized she was capable of such schemes. "That's not all," Marlene continued. "I received a copy of the loan agreement from the bank. Take a look at the signature." She held it out to me. In the column for the borrower's signature, there was a scrawl that remotely resembled my signature. "That doesn't even look close," I exclaimed. "How could the bank accept such an obvious forgery?" "Because someone at the bank helped your daughter." Marlene tapped her finger on the document. "Note the name of the loan officer who processed the transaction, Timo Schmidt." "Does that name ring a bell?" I hesitated. "No, I don't remember it." "What about her daughter?" "I don't know. Wait a minute." I remembered the conversation at Zoe's birthday party. Leo had mentioned someone named Timo whom Hannah had studied with. "I think they dated for a while, but I'm not sure if it's the same Timo." "That's worth checking out." Marlene made a note. "If the loan officer knew your daughter personally, that would explain how she managed to bypass the standard checks." Marlene pulled out another document. "Here's the loan statement. 2 payments have already been made. Guess by whom? Hannah?" "No, Coldwell Holdings. The money is coming from a corporate account." Another attempt to hide the connection. I leaned back in my chair, trying to process what I had heard. My daughter hadn't just used my documents. She had built an entire scheme to cover her actions. "What about Leo?" I asked. "Did you find out what role he played in all this?" "There is no direct evidence of his involvement," Marlene replied. "But based on his reaction, as you described it, he was definitely aware of his sister's schemes. The question is whether he actively helped or just turned a blind eye." At that moment, Marlene's cell phone rang. She excused herself and answered. The conversation was short, but afterward, the lawyer's face brightened. "Great news. St. Elizabeth's Hospital has confirmed that you were indeed there on March 14th, from 8:30 a.m. to 3:45 p.m. They have kept all the records, including the time of each procedure and consultation, and the loan agreement, according to the bank's timestamp, was signed on the same day at 11:20 a.m. "So I physically couldn't have been at the bank at that time," I said. "Exactly," Marlene nodded. "It's a watertight alibi. Now we have all the evidence we need for the lawsuit. The forged signature, your alibi for the time the contract was signed, the questionable role of the loan officer, and the obvious scheme to conceal the true purpose of the loan." I fell silent, processing the information. On one hand, I was relieved that irrefutable evidence had been gathered. On the other hand, I was depressed at the thought of how carefully Hannah had planned the whole thing. This was not an impulsive act or a moment of weakness. This was a well-thought-out fraud against her own mother. "Are you okay?" Marlene asked, noticing my state. "Not really," I answered honestly. "I just can't believe that my daughter, that she could do this to me." "Unfortunately, it's not uncommon, Marlene. Especially when it comes to elderly parents. Many children begin to see them not as fully fledged human beings, but as property, or a nuisance, or a source of potential inheritance. It's sad, but it's a reality." I nodded. Tears welled up in my throat. "You know, when Herbert, my husband, died, I thought nothing worse would ever happen in my life. But this hurts even more." Marlene silently handed me a box of tissues. I dabbed my eyes, trying to compose myself. "I'm sorry. I'm not usually so emotional." "Don't apologize," Marlene said gently. "You have every right to feel whatever you want in such a situation." We sat in silence for a while. Then Marlene asked, "What do you want to do next?" "We have enough evidence for a civil lawsuit. If we win, the bank will void the loan agreement, and you won't have to pay the loan, but the house will likely be seized because it was purchased with illegally acquired funds." "And the criminal trial?" I asked quietly. "For that, you would have to file a report with the police," Marlene replied. "They will conduct their investigation, and if they find enough evidence, the case will be forwarded to the district attorney's office. If your daughter is found guilty, she could face a fine and possibly probation. An actual prison sentence is rare in these cases, especially if it's a first offense." I considered. Did I want my daughter to have a criminal record? No. But did I want her to realize the seriousness of what she had done? Definitely yes. "Could we start with the civil suit?" I asked. "Could we leave the criminal trial open? I want to see how Hannah reacts. Maybe she'll come to her senses, admit her guilt." "Of course," Marlene agreed. "We can take it step by step. First, we file a civil suit, and then, depending on how things develop, we decide whether to involve the police. Thank you. I was relieved. When can we file the suit? I'll have the documents ready by the end of the week, Marlene said. We will file the suit in the Kings Point District Court. After that, your daughter will receive an official notification of the lawsuit. It usually takes about a month to prepare for the first hearing. A whole month. I was surprised. That long? Those are the court rules, Marlene shrugged. But the good news is that I will file a motion for a preliminary injunction. If the judge grants it, the bank will suspend all demands from the loan until the end of the trial, so you won't have to worry about payments during that time. When I left Marlene's office, the sun was shining outside, a stark contrast to my inner state. I felt devastated, as if I had gone through a serious illness. On the way home, I stopped at the small cafe where I sometimes met Andrea. I wanted to be among people, listen to ordinary conversations, to distract myself from my heavy thoughts. I ordered tea and watched the customers. At the next table, a young woman was having lunch with her elderly mother. They were chatting animatedly about something, laughing. The daughter carefully adjusted her mother's scarf, listened to her with sincere interest. It was an ordinary picture that would not have evoked any particular emotions in me before. But now I looked at them with a pang of longing. Why had things gone wrong between Hannah and me? When had we lost the closeness that should be between a mother and daughter? Maybe I was a bad mother, didn't pay enough attention to my children, demanded too much, or conversely, too little. No, I always tried to be a good mother. Herbert and I worked hard to give the children everything they needed. I read them books, helped them with homework, and supported their hobbies. Sure, I made mistakes. All parents do. But I never betrayed my children, never lied, never exploited them. Hannah betrayed me, used me, lied to me, and she didn't even think it was wrong, judging by her reaction. Maybe it wasn't about me. Maybe it was about her character, her decisions, her moral compass. And as much as it pained me to admit it, I couldn't be held responsible for her choices. When I got home, I found 3 messages from Hannah on my answering machine. The first demanded that I call her back immediately. In the second, she threatened serious consequences if I didn't stop this lawyer nonsense. In the third, her tone changed to pleading. Mom, please, talk. I'll explain everything. Don't do this, please. I didn't call back. What else was there to say? What excuses could she give? I took out a loan in your name because I wanted a better house. I forged your signature because I knew you would say no. I kept it all from you because I didn't think it was necessary to inform you. No explanation could change what had happened. My daughter had abused my trust, broken the law, and endangered my financial security. And the worst part was, she didn't even see the harm in it. I went to bed early but couldn't sleep for a long time, replaying the events of the last few days in my mind. All the evidence pointed to the fact that Hannah had acted deliberately and calculatingly. She hadn't just used my name. She had developed a scheme to cover her actions. She had registered the house with a shell company. She had used her bank contacts to bypass the checks. It wasn't an impulsive mistake. It was a carefully planned fraud, and Leo knew about it. He may not have been directly involved, but he knew and approved of his sister's actions. His reaction to my call left no doubt. My own children conspiring against me. They didn't see me as a person with feelings and rights, but as, what? An obstacle? An inconvenience? A means to an end? How could I not have seen this before? How could I not see that my children's attitude toward me had long crossed the line of mere disrespect? My whole life, I tried to be a good mother, to support them, to help them, to make concessions. And as a result, they decided that they could use me however they wanted. Well, it's time to show them that they were wrong. I am not a helpless old woman who can be manipulated. I am a person who knows how to stand up for herself. I am a mother who loved her children but will not allow them to trample on my dignity. Yes, I am in pain. Yes, I feel betrayed. But this pain does not break me. On the contrary, it gives me strength. Strength to fight for justice. Strength to show my children that their actions have consequences. Strength to finally respect myself. I called Marlene this morning and told her I was ready to file the suit as soon as possible. It was time to act decisively. 2 weeks had passed since the lawsuit had been filed. Marlene warned me that Hannah would receive an official notification of the lawsuit in the next few days. After that, we could expect a new wave of calls and attempts to influence me. So, I tried to mentally prepare myself for the impending storm. Contrary to expectations, however, The phone remained silent. Neither Hannah nor Leo tried to contact me. I even started to worry. Maybe something had happened to the children. But then I decided they were just ignoring me, hoping I would come to my senses and withdraw the lawsuit. Thursday morning, Andrea called. She spoke quickly and excitedly. "Wilma, are you sitting? You'd better sit down." "What's wrong?" I asked, sinking into the chair next to the phone. "My granddaughter Lena, you remember her, right? She works part-time at the Silver Spoon Catering Company," Andrea began. "Well, she just called me and told me that her company got the contract to cater Hannah's party. The housewarming party is on Saturday at Lakeview Terrace." I was silent, processing the information. Hannah was throwing a housewarming party in a house that had been bought with a loan fraudulently taken out in my name. And of course, she hadn't invited me. "Wilma, are you there?" Andrea's voice brought me back to reality. "Yes, I'm here," I answered. I'm just thinking about what I heard." "That's just unheard of," Andrea exclaimed. "Throwing a housewarming party while a lawsuit is pending and not even inviting your own mother. I always said your Hannah was a real piece of work, but this goes too far." "How many guests is she expecting?" I asked, surprised at my own calmness. "Lena says the reservation is for 40 people. Cocktails, appetizers, champagne, all the finest. The party starts at 6 p.m. I imagined Hannah leading the guests through her luxurious new home, accepting congratulations, talking about the designer renovations and the lake view, and not a word about how she had managed to buy the property. "Thank you for informing me, Andrea," I said. "That is important information." "What are you going to do?" Her voice sounded curious. "I don't know yet," I said honestly, "but I'm sure I'll think of something." After talking with Andrea, I dialed Marlene's number. Luckily, she was in, and answered immediately. "Mrs. Schneider, I was just about to call you," she said. "The process servers can't manage to serve your daughter. She doesn't open the door and doesn't answer the phone. I think I know when and where we can definitely find her," I said, and told her about the upcoming party. There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Are you suggesting that we serve her the summons right at the housewarming party?" Marlene asked. "That is unconventional." "Are there any legal obstacles?" I asked. "No. Legally there are no obstacles," Marlene replied. "The process server has the right to serve the documents wherever the defendant is located, but it could cause a scandal." "Let them do it," I said firmly. "My daughter is throwing a party in a house she bought with illegally acquired money, and she doesn't even invite me, even though the loan is in my name. I think a small scandal is the least she deserves." "All right, I'll contact the process server," Marlene agreed after a moment's thought. "But are you sure you want to be there personally? Wouldn't it be better to let the process server do the job himself?" I considered it. Really? Why would I want to be there? To see the shock on my daughter's face? To savor her humiliation? No, that wasn't it. I wanted Hannah to realize that I was not a helpless old woman who could be used and forgotten. I am a person who can stand up for herself. "Yes, I want to be there," I said firmly. "Not out of revenge, but to show my daughter that I have not given up and will not give up." "I understand." Marlene's voice was respectful. "In that case, I will arrange with the process server to meet you near your daughter's house on Saturday evening. Let's say 5:30 p.m. That is good," I agreed. "Let me know the exact location closer to the date." After talking with Marlene, I felt strangely calm. The decision was made, and now I just had to follow the plan. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in control of the situation, instead of just drifting. The rest of the week passed in anxious anticipation. I tried to keep busy with everyday tasks, cleaning, reading, working in the garden. But my thoughts kept returning to Saturday. Am I doing the right thing? Is it too cruel to spoil my daughter's celebration? But every time the doubts began to gnaw at me, I remembered what Hannah had done. and my resolve returned. Saturday, I woke up early. The day was clear and warm, the perfect weather for a lakeside party. I stood in front of my closet for a long time, wondering what to wear. In the end, I chose a dark blue dress with a white collar, severe but elegant. I did my hair and applied light makeup. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't see a woman broken by grief, but a person with dignity and fortitude. At 5 p.m., I called a taxi. Normally, I use public transport, but today was a special occasion. Besides, I didn't know how I would get home afterward, and I didn't want to depend on bus schedules. Marlene had sent me the address of a cafe near Lakeview Terrace, where we were to meet the process server. When the taxi pulled up at the cafe, I saw Marlene sitting at a table on the outdoor patio. Next to her sat a tall, middle-aged man in an elegant suit. Mrs. Schneider. Marlene stood up when she saw me. I'd like to introduce you to Mr. Elias Meyer, the process server. Mr. Meyer nodded politely. Good evening, ma'am. Ms. Richter has explained the situation to me. I will serve Mrs. Coldwell the lawsuit summons, according to all regulations. Thank you. I shook his hand, noticing the firm grip. Here is the plan of action, Marlene said. Mr. Meyer will pose as a catering worker to get into the house. As soon as he finds your daughter, he will hand her the papers. You can go in with him or wait outside and come in later, whichever is more comfortable for you. I considered whether I should show up with the process server or wait until the documents were served and then go in, which would make a stronger impression. I think it would be better if I go in with Mr. Meyer, I decided. Hannah should know immediately that this is not a coincidence or a twist of fate. Whatever you say, Marlene nodded. Just remember, your goal is not to cause a scandal, but to show that you are serious and will not back down. Try to maintain your dignity, no matter what happens. I will try, I promised, although I was trembling inside. We decided to walk. It was only a 10-minute walk from the cafe to Hannah's house. Along the way, Marlene explained the legal aspects of the situation to me one more time. Once the service is complete, your daughter is officially considered informed about the lawsuit. She has 21 days to file a response with the court. If she fails to do so, the court can issue a default judgment in your favor. I nodded, but my thoughts were far away. I imagined entering a house where I had never been welcome. I would see my daughter's face when she realized her schemes had been exposed. What would she say? How would she react? And how would I feel about it? Lakeview Terrace was exactly as I had imagined it. A row of luxury villas by the lake with manicured lawns and expensive cars in the driveways. Number 27 stood out even against this backdrop. A 2-story house with panoramic windows and a large terrace with a lake view. Several cars were already parked in front of the house, and muffled music and laughter drifted from the open windows. The party is in full swing, said Mr. Meyer, adjusting his tie. Perfect timing. We walked to the front door. I felt my heart pounding in my chest, but I tried to stay calm. Mr. Meyer pressed the doorbell. A few seconds later, the door was opened by a young woman in a catering uniform. Are you from Silver Spoon? She asked. We were expecting additional staff. That's right. Mr. Meyer nodded confidently. I was sent to help with the service, and this lady is the quality inspector. We need to speak with the mistress of the house. Sure, come on in. The girl led us inside. Mrs. Coldwell is in the living room with her guests. We entered a spacious foyer with marble floors and mirrored walls. There were flower vases everywhere, and a crystal chandelier that must have cost a fortune hung from the ceiling. I held my breath. This is what the money from the loan in my name had been used for. Mr. Meyer strode confidently toward where the voices were coming from. I followed him, trying not to betray my agitation. We entered a huge living room with panoramic windows overlooking the lake. The room was filled with people in evening attire, champagne glasses in hand. In the middle of the group stood Hannah, in an elegant beige dress, chatting animatedly about something. When she saw an unknown man in a suit, She paused mid-sentence. When she saw me, her face froze in shock. "Mama," she said, incredulous. "How did you get here?" The room fell silent. All eyes were fixed on me and Mr. Meyer, who stepped forward. "Mrs. Hannah Coldwell?" he asked in an official tone. "Yes," my daughter answered, confused. "And who are you?" "I am Elias Meyer, the process server." He pulled some papers from his breast pocket. "I am hereby serving you with a summons for the lawsuit filed by Wilma Schneider regarding fraud and forgery." Hannah's face turned pale. She stood motionless, staring at the papers held out to her. "What the hell is this?" shouted Frank, Hannah's husband, stepping forward. "What lawsuit?" "The lawsuit concerns a mortgage loan of $950,000 that was illegally taken out in Mrs. Schneider's name," Mr. Meyer explained calmly. "Mrs. Coldwell, please take the papers." Hannah mechanically took the papers, still staring at me in shock. "Mama, have you lost your mind?" she hissed. "Making a spectacle like this in front of everyone?" No, Hannah, you're the one who's crazy," I said quietly but firmly. "Taking out a loan in my name without my knowledge, forging my signature, buying a house with money that doesn't belong to you." The room became so quiet you could hear the ticking of the wall clock. The guests looked around, confused. Someone started to move toward the exit. "Mrs. Schneider?" Mr. Meyer leaned slightly toward me. "My mission is fulfilled. I can leave, unless you have further instructions." "Thank you, Mr. Meyer." I nodded. "You can go." The process server bowed politely and walked to the exit. An uncomfortable silence hung in the living room. Hannah stood there, clutching the documents she had received, seeming unsure what to do next. "Let's continue the party, folks." Frank tried to lighten the mood. "Miss," he said to the catering girl, "bring more champagne while my mother-in-law and I talk in the study." He took a step toward me to take my arm, but I pulled back. "No, Frank," I said. "No talking in the study. Everything I have to say, I have already said in court. Now I would like to see the house that was bought with the loan money in my name. I have the right to do that, don't I?" "Mama, stop it right now." Hannah had finally found her voice again. "You are embarrassing us in front of everyone." "No, Hannah, you are embarrassing yourself with your actions," I said calmly. "I am only telling the truth." "What truth?" Leo, whom I hadn't noticed among the guests, interjected. "What are you making up again, Mother?" "I'm not making anything up, Leo." I turned to my son. "Your sister took out the loan in my name by forging my signature, and you knew about it, but you did nothing to stop her." That's not true," Leo mumbled, but I could see in his eyes that I had hit the mark. "Enough." Hannah threw the papers onto the coffee table. "Mama, you leave right now or I'll call the police." "Call them," I said calmly. "It will be interesting to explain to the officers why you are throwing the person out of the house whose name is on the loan used to buy it." There was a surprised murmur among the guests. A few even whistled softly. Hannah looked as if she had been slapped in the face. "Ladies and gentlemen," I addressed the guests, "I apologize for the scene. I didn't want to ruin your evening, but I thought you should know that this beautiful house was bought with fraudulent money. My daughter used my identification and forged my signature to obtain a loan for $950,000, and then she registered the house with a shell company to cover up her actions." "That's a lie," Hannah shouted. "Mama, you agreed to help us with the loan. You gave me power of attorney." "Did I?" I raised an eyebrow. "Where is this power of attorney? Why didn't you show it to the bank? Why did you have to forge my signature? And why did I only find out about the loan when I got the letter about the overdue payment?" Hannah fell silent, pressing her lips into a thin line. Frank put his hand on her shoulder, as if to support her. "Mama, let's not make a scene," he said conciliatorily. "We can discuss this calmly tomorrow, for example." "No, Frank." I shook my head. "We already tried to discuss things." Hannah ignored my calls. "Leo urged me not to do anything stupid. None of you took the situation seriously. You thought I would just accept it, like I always do, but not this time." I paused, walking up and down the living room. Luxurious furniture, designer lamps, paintings in expensive frames. Everything screamed money. Money obtained through fraud. "It's a beautiful house," I said. "It's a shame we'll have to sell it soon to pay off the loan. Or the bank will seize it. I haven't decided yet which option I prefer." "You can't do that," Hannah cried out, taking a step toward me. This is our home. We've worked our whole lives to be able to afford a house like this. No, Hannah, I contradicted. You didn't work for this. You just stole money by using my name. And now you will have to be held accountable for it. At that moment, Zoe, my granddaughter, ran into the living room. She stopped when she saw the tense scene. What's wrong? She asked, looking from her mother to me. Grandma, why are you here? Hello, Zoe. I smiled at her. I came to see your new house. It's beautiful. Zoe, go to your room, Hannah said sharply. Now! But Mama, now! Hannah repeated, raising her voice. Zoe gave me a confused look and reluctantly left the room. See what you've done? Hannah turned on me. You've traumatized the child with your stupid accusations. No, Hannah, I said calmly. You traumatized your daughter by setting an example of dishonesty and disrespect for the law. What will she think when she finds out the truth about how you got this house? She will never find out, Hannah hissed through her teeth. Because there is no truth. It's just the fiction of a senile old woman who is jealous of her own children's success. I felt anger rising in me, but I held it back. This was not the time or place for emotional outbursts. Fiction? I shook my head. I have proof, Hannah. Handwriting analyses that prove the signature was forged. Medical records that prove my alibi for the time the contract was signed. Property records that show the house was registered to a shell company called Coldwell Holdings. Information about loan payments made from the company account. And the testimony of Timo Schmidt, the loan officer, who admitted to helping you bypass the checks because of your previous relationship. With every word I said, Hannah's face grew paler and paler. For the first time in our entire confrontation, I saw fear flash in her eyes. You're bluffing, she whispered. Timo would never. He already testified, I lied, hoping Marlene would forgive me this little ruse. When he had the choice between helping you or facing criminal prosecution, he chose to save his own skin. Typical of men, isn't it? Frank now looked at his wife with confusion and suspicion. Hannah, what is she talking about? Timo? Nothing, said Hannah. She's making it up. Then why are you pale? Frank asked. And why did you never tell me the details of how the loan was arranged? I saw a shadow of mistrust emerge between the couple. Frank might have known about his wife's schemes in general, but the details seemed to have been withheld from him. Ladies and gentlemen, I said again to the guests, many of whom were already feeling uncomfortable. Again, I apologize for ruining the evening, but perhaps you should reconsider your relationship with the owners of this house. People who can deceive their own mother will likely not be honest with friends and colleagues either. Get out, Hannah shouted, losing her composure. Get out of my house. Technically, it's not your house yet, I pointed out. And it won't be if the court rules on my lawsuit. But I will leave, because I have done everything I came to do. I turned to leave, but stopped when I saw Zoe standing in the doorway. She must have overheard our conversation, and her eyes were wide with shock. Grandma, she whispered, is it true? Did Mom take the money without your permission? I looked at my granddaughter and didn't know what to say. I didn't want to hurt her, but I couldn't lie either. Yes, Zoe, I said gently. Unfortunately, it's true, but it's not your fault what your parents did. Zoe, don't listen to her, Hannah cried out. Grandma is confused. She doesn't know what she's saying. I understand perfectly well, Hannah, I said, and your daughter will soon understand everything too. Children don't stay children forever. They grow up and begin to see their parents as they really are. With those words, I walked to the exit. No one tried to stop me. I felt the gazes of the guests, surprised, sympathetic, judgmental, but I didn't care. I had done what I had to do. The story of the lawsuit and the housewarming scandal spread through Kings Point like wildfire. In a small town where everyone knows everyone, such events cannot go unnoticed. The very next day, Andrea called me, excited and out of breath. Wilma, you won't believe it. The whole town is talking about it. Lena said the guests scattered within half an hour of you leaving, and Frank and Hannah had a terrible fight right in front of the other people. I listened to her story with mixed feelings. On one hand, there was the satisfaction that the truth had finally come to light. On the other hand, there was the unpleasant aftertaste of the thought that I had been the cause of my own daughter's public humiliation. She might have deserved it, but it's always hard for a mother to see her child suffer, even if that child is a grown woman who committed a crime. What about Leo? I asked. Was he also there until the end? According to Lena, he left right after you. Looked like he had seen a ghost. The day after the housewarming scandal, the phone in my house rang off the hook. Neighbors, former colleagues, even people I hadn't spoken to in years called. Everyone wanted to know details, express support, or simply gossip. I answered politely but briefly, without going into detail. This story was painful enough as it was. I didn't need to turn it into entertainment for the curious. Toward evening, Marlene called. "Mrs. Schneider, how are you? I hope yesterday's events didn't upset you too much." "I'm fine," I replied. "I'm just tired of the calls. The whole town seems to be talking about our family scandal." "Unfortunately, that's unavoidable," Marlene sighed. "But the good news is that after yesterday, your daughter has finally received the official service of the lawsuit. Now she must either answer in court or settle." "Do you think she will settle?" I asked hesitantly. "She probably will, especially if she hires a good lawyer. Any lawyer would advise her to avoid a trial, given the amount of evidence against her." Marlene was right. 3 days later, Hannah called me herself. Her voice sounded unusually subdued. "Mama, we need to talk. Can I come over?" "Sure," I said, a little surprised by her tone. Hannah arrived an hour later. She looked worn out with dark circles under her eyes. She was dressed simply, without the usual elegant clothes, jeans, a sweater, minimal makeup. When she entered the house, she paused uncertainly in the hallway, as if she didn't know where to go next. "Come into the kitchen," I said. "I just made tea." We sat at the table across from each other. Hannah held the cup with both hands, as if warming herself with it. "Mom," she began after a pause, "I came to talk about the lawsuit." I figured as much. I nodded. "I'm listening." "I've hired a lawyer," Hannah said. He looked at the case file and said that. She stammered, "I don't have much of a chance of winning. The evidence is too compelling." I remained silent, waiting for her to continue. "He offered to settle," Hannah continued, "to avoid a trial and possible criminal prosecution." "And what does this settlement entail?" I asked. "I'll take over the loan," Hannah said quickly. "I'll have it refinanced in my own name. I'll pay all the interest and penalties. I'll compensate you for emotional damages, $10,000. In return, you drop the lawsuit and don't file a police report." I thought about it. The proposal was reasonable from a practical standpoint, but something about it made me uncomfortable. "What about the house?" I asked. "What would happen to the house on Lakeview Terrace?" Hannah pressed her lips together. "Frank and I have decided to sell it. After the scandal, after everything that's happened, we can't stay there. Besides, we need the money to pay off the loan and compensate you." "I see." I nodded. "And you? Do you realize what you've done?" "What do you mean?" Hannah frowned. "I want to know if you realize the seriousness of what you did," I explained. "You didn't just take the money without asking. You forged documents, defrauded the bank, endangered my financial security. That's a crime, Hannah." "I know," she said quietly. My lawyer explained all the possible consequences. Up to 5 years in prison, a fine of up to $250,000, a criminal record. "I'm not talking about the legal consequences," I interrupted. "I'm talking about the moral side. Do you realize that you abused my trust? That you did something to me that a daughter should never do to her mother?" Hannah fell silent, staring into her cup. "Why did you do it?" I asked. "I really want to understand." Frank and I had been dreaming of a house on the lake for a long time, Hannah began after a pause. "But we didn't have enough money for a down payment. And then I found out that Timo, a former classmate of mine, was working at Midwest People's Bank. A friend. He said he could help with the loan, but he needed a co-borrower with a good credit history. At first, I thought about asking you, but you decided it would be easier to forge my signature," I finished for her. "I knew you would say no," Hannah said with sudden bitterness. "You were always so proper, so cautious, always saying no to every risky proposal. And I wanted this house. I wanted to show everyone that I had made something of my life, that I wasn't just a low-paid CPS investigator, but a successful woman who could afford Lakeview Terrace. And for that, you were willing to risk my home, my reputation, my future? I didn't think you would find out," Hannah said quietly. "We planned to pay the loan on time. No overdue payments. But then Frank had some business problems, and we missed a payment. And the bank sent me a warning. I nodded. That's how I found out. We were silent for a moment. Outside the window, it began to rain. The drops tapped softly, monotonously and soothingly on the gutter. Well, I said finally, I will consider your settlement offer, but I need to consult with my lawyer. Of course. Hannah nodded quickly. I understand. But Mama, please, don't take this to court. It would ruin my career. I would lose my job. And Zoe? She would be so embarrassed in front of her friends. I looked at my daughter and saw no remorse. I saw fear of the consequences, not shame for what she had done. She still didn't realize that the main problem wasn't a threat to her career or her reputation, but that she had betrayed her own mother. I'll give you an answer in a few days, I said. I need to think about it. Hannah left, leaving behind a feeling of incompleteness. I saw no genuine remorse in her, only the desire to avoid trouble, and that made me question the idea of a settlement. The next day, Leo came. Unlike his sister, he was aggressive from the start. Mom, this has gone too far. Do you realize you're destroying our family with your actions? I'm not destroying the family, Leo, I said calmly. That was you and Hannah when you decided you could use me for your own purposes. Oh my God, that's so melodramatic. He rolled his eyes. Nobody used you. Hannah just wanted a better life for her family. She always wanted a house on the lake. And she decided to get it at my expense, I said. That's called fraud, Leo, and you knew about it. But you did nothing to stop your sister. Leo paced the room nervously. Look, I didn't know all the details. Okay, Hannah told me you had an agreement, that you agreed to help with the loan. And you believed that? I smirked. After knowing me your whole life, you really believed I agreed to take out a loan for almost $1 million? I don't know, Leo shrugged. Maybe you finally decided to do something good for your children. His words hit me like a slap in the face. Finally decided to do something useful. As if all the years of care, love, support meant nothing. As if I owed them something in addition to what I had already given them. Get out, I said quietly. Now. Mom, don't be so dramatic. Leo tried to take my hand. I just want you to drop the lawsuit. Hannah is already being punished. Everyone is talking. Frank is about to divorce her. The house has to be sold. Get out, I said again. I'm not discussing this with you, especially after what you just said. Leo wanted to argue, but something in my face stopped him. He sighed and went to the door. You'll regret this, Mom, when you're all alone. After he left, I sat in the kitchen for a long time, looking out the window, thinking. Maybe Leo was right. Maybe I was being too hard on Hannah. After all, she is my daughter, whatever her faults. But then I remembered her face when she talked about the possible consequences for her career, not a word about how her actions affected me. No hint of understanding that she had done something irrevocably wrong to her own mother. I called Marlene and told her about Hannah's offer. Legally, it's a reasonable offer, the lawyer said. You will be compensated and freed from your loan obligations. But of course, the decision is yours. What happens if we proceed with the lawsuit? I asked. Given the evidence, the court will almost certainly rule in your favor, Marlene replied. The bank will be obligated to annul the loan agreement as fraudulent. And then there are two options. Either the bank goes to the police to report fraud, or they try to recover the money from your daughter in a civil proceeding. And the house? The house would most likely be seized to repay the loan, as it serves as collateral for the loan. I considered. Strangely, the prospect of losing the house bothered me the least. After all, it wasn't my house. I had never been inside it before that evening. More important was the question, what would Hannah learn if I simply agreed to a settlement? I need to think about it, I said to Marlene. I will let you know what I decide. That night, I received another call from Andrea. Wilma, have you heard the latest news? Frank left Hannah. They say he was furious when he found out about the loan. It turns out she hadn't told him everything either. I sighed. Not that I had any particular sympathy for Frank, but a family breaking up couldn't make me happy, especially since he and Hannah had a daughter. What about Zoe? I asked. Is she still living with her mother? Yes, but word is Frank is going to file for joint custody. The problems were multiplying like a snowball. I didn't want my granddaughter to suffer from this story, but was it my fault what happened? Hadn't Hannah's actions triggered this chain of events? I stayed awake all night, thinking about the situation. In the morning, I decided not to settle. The court should hear the case and make a fair judgment. Only then would Hannah truly realize the seriousness of what she had done. The trial began a month later. Hannah hired an expensive lawyer from the city who built a defense on the fact that I had supposedly verbally consented to the loan. But as Marlene presented evidence, handwriting analyses, medical documents proving my alibi, testimonies from bank employees, it became clear that the defense didn't stand a chance. The judge, an older woman with a sharp gaze, listened attentively to both sides. At the end of the second session, she said, "The evidence clearly shows that Mrs. Coldwell acted without her mother's consent and forged her signature on loan documents. Such actions fall under the definition of fraud and forgery. However, given the family relationship between the plaintiff and the defendant, I suggest the parties reconsider the possibility of a settlement. This court is adjourned for 1 week." During the break, Hannah approached me in the courthouse hallway. She looked exhausted and depressed. "Mom, please, let's put this behind us. You see what's coming. I could lose everything. My job, my reputation, maybe even my freedom. Think about Zoe. What would it be like for her to live with the stigma of being the daughter of a criminal?" I looked at her and saw not a remorseful daughter, but a person trying until the last possible moment to escape responsibility for her actions. Even now, she was only thinking of herself, using Zoe as leverage. "You should have thought about Zoe before you committed the crime," I said quietly, "and about the example you were setting for your daughter with your actions. Is that what this is about?" Hannah sneered bitterly. "Are you trying to teach me a lesson? To prove that Mom is always right? To get revenge for all the years I didn't obey you?" "No, Hannah," I shook my head. "I just want justice, and I want you to finally realize that your actions have consequences, not just for you, but for other people." Hannah looked at me with a mixture of disbelief and anger. "You know what? Do what you want. But after this, I no longer consider you my mother, and you can forget about having a granddaughter." She turned and walked away, leaving me with a heavy heart in the empty hallway. Her words hurt deeply, but they didn't shake my resolve. If that was the price of justice, I was willing to pay it. A week later, the court ruled in my favor. The loan agreement was declared null and void, and the bank was ordered to cancel all my obligations arising from it. Hannah had to pay me compensation of $20,000 for emotional damages. The judge also noted that the bank had the right to turn to law enforcement regarding the fraud, but that decision was left to the financial institution. After the verdict was announced, Hannah walked past me without a word, without looking in my direction. Leo, who was sitting in the courtroom, also turned away defiantly. I was alone, except for Marlene and Andrea, who had supported me throughout the entire process. "You won, Mrs. Schneider," Marlene said, shaking my hand. "Justice has been served." "Yes," I nodded. "But at what cost?" "Sometimes the truth has a price," Marlene said philosophically. "The question is whether it's worth the price." I didn't answer. I didn't know the answer to that question at that moment. The consequences of the lawsuit were not long in coming. The bank did not go to the police, preferring to settle the matter amicably. They seized the house on Lakeview Terrace to pay off the loan. Hannah and Zoe had to move into a small apartment in another part of town. Frank filed for divorce and requested joint custody of their daughter. Leo stopped returning my calls. His wife Daniela, with whom I always had a cool relationship, called one day to tell me that they didn't want me to have contact with their children. "They are too impressionable for family dramas," she said. I found myself isolated. The children and grandchildren, who had previously been less than eager to associate with me, had now completely severed ties. I became a pariah in my own family. Strangely, I didn't feel as bitter as I had expected. Was I in pain? Of course. I lost my children and grandchildren, perhaps forever. But at the same time, I gained something equally important: self-respect and freedom from the toxic relationships that had been eating away at my soul for years. Andrea became my greatest support during this time. She came over almost every day, brought freshly baked goods, told me the town news, was just there for me. It was she who suggested that I start a new chapter in my life. "Wilma, how many years have you lived for others?" she asked me one day over a cup of tea. "First for your husband, then for your children. And when was the last time you did something just for yourself?" Something you dreamed of but put off for later? I thought, really, when? Maybe before I had children, or even before marriage. See? Andrea exclaimed, noticing my confusion. It's time to change that. You are free. You have a small savings plus the compensation from the court. What do you want to do? Where do you want to go? What do you want to learn? I don't know. I was confused. It's been so long since I've thought about my own wishes. Then let's start small, Andrea said firmly. I've signed us up for computer classes at the community center. Twice a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays. It starts next Tuesday. Computer skills? I was surprised. Why? Because the world doesn't stand still, and neither should we. Andrea smiled. Besides, it'll be fun. Imagine us laughing at each other's clumsy attempts to master these modern things. I agreed, albeit with some hesitation. I thought it was too late at my age to learn new things, but Andrea was persistent. And she was right. The course turned out to be exactly what I needed. Not so much for the knowledge I acquired, although I learned a lot, but for the atmosphere. There were people my age with similar problems and interests. People who didn't see me as a burden or a source of potential inheritance. People with whom I could interact as an equal. About a month after the course started, I received a call from Marlene. Mrs. Schneider, I have news for you. The Midwest People's Bank is offering you an additional $10,000 for emotional damages. They have admitted that their employee, Timo Schmidt, violated their verification procedures when issuing the loan, and they want to avoid further proceedings. Well, that's fair enough, I said. If the bank had been more vigilant, none of this would have happened. Quite right, Marlene agreed. I will prepare all the necessary documents. How are you, by the way? Surprisingly good, I said honestly. Of course, I miss the time with my grandchildren, but otherwise, I feel freer than I have in years. I'm glad to hear that. Marlene sounded genuinely pleased. You know, I've seen many cases like this, and often people, even when they win in court, feel like losers because of a broken relationship. But you seem to have found something positive in this situation. Yes, I think so, I agreed. I've realized that I can live for myself, not just for my children. And that my value as a person doesn't depend on their attitude toward me. After receiving the additional compensation from the bank, I was, for the first time in my life, the owner of a fairly large sum of money that I could dispose of as I wished. Previously, all my savings had either been spent on my family's needs or saved for a rainy day. Now I could afford something I had long dreamed of but never dared to do. You should take a trip, Andrea urged me. Remember how you always wanted to see Italy? That was a long time ago, I smiled, even before the children were born. Herbert had promised that we would go for our silver anniversary, but then my health problems started, and I had no time to travel. So, make up for lost time. Andrea winked. Imagine Venice, gondolas, narrow streets, cafes on the Piazza San Marco. Would you come with me? I asked suddenly. Andrea froze with the cup at her lips. Me, but I thought you wanted to go alone. Why would I want to go alone? I shook my head. It would be more fun with two people. Besides, you've always been braver than me. When I'm confused, you'll know exactly what to do. Andrea smiled. You know, I've never been to Europe. I always wanted to, but I always had children, grandchildren, obligations. Yes, Wilma, I'll come. Good, I said.